Just set the wrist slightly here. All right. I don't like that glare though. That's terrible. All right. That's a little better. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Tom Kawczynski. Welcome to Sons of Dust Ministry. I am the pastor here, and today we're debuting a new feature that I'm bringing forward based upon a request a lot of you guys have had over the years. Obviously, we've done a lot of content, a lot of programming, covered a lot of public issues. Pinelander. Free Atlantic Radio, Coronavirus Central, all these sort of things. And what I'm trying to do here is a little bit different. That we're talking about things that are happening in the world, but we're also talking about things that are happening in the world from the context of looking at it from a Christian perspective. We're looking at it at the role God plays in the world and the world of our relationship to Him. It's reached a point where everyone has covered the events that's out there, and there are many channels who do that very, very well. Who are out there. Many of them you can find if you're in our group at Atlantic Homeland, t.me/Atlantic Homeland. But what I want to focus on with today's effort and what I'm going to do with this channel when I come on here is to kind of take more the philosophical approach, get into these ideas of how we think about things, and use that to educate, inform, and illustrate ways where we can walk through our days with hopefully greater joy and less despair, like we were talking about during the Sunday sermon, by making sure that we are also looking upon how we do things to serve the Lord in all that we do, and how by structuring our world around that basis, we can actually start to enjoy it much more. So that's going to be one of the goals that I'm going to have going forward. And what I will try to do is have these periodic episodes where I come on to talk about an individual issue. I'm going to try to keep them under 30 minutes so that we can reach, an audience who has the ability to listen for that long, and hopefully it'll be of some value to you. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about was, when we get into arguments about politics and all sorts of stuff, a lot of times religious people and people who are believers don't like to touch these issues. And the reason they don't is because they feel like their sense of good is so much so that they don't want to get involved in this loss of the world. And it's a completely fair position, right? Because what happens is you start to realize that much of the conflict that happens in the world is because man, thinking he knows best, thinks he knows what is good. And ultimately, there's one of two positions. Either man knows what's good for himself or he doesn't. And basically, within the Christian belief, we basically accept as a matter of wisdom that we don't really know what's best for us of our own merits. We are of a fallen nature, which is to say that we will do the things that will benefit us in the short term, that will pleasure us in the short term, that will remove us from pain, but we will do so without mindfulness of the consequence of what that brings on to others. And that lack of mindfulness is where you can have two good people with the best of intentions do something that leads utterly to the worst of results. And therein you have, the dialectic, you have politics, you have everything since the Garden of Eden that plays out. And so the question that we ask as a society, and the question that I was posing in my own mind that I'm sharing with you today, is whether or not there is a different way to approach this, where maybe we could have a society where we weren't constantly at war with one another over what was good and what was right. But if we don't know what is good and right, and we can't determine that despite our best efforts, how do we go about doing that? And that's where God comes into the equation. And that's why you need God at the center of your civilization, of your culture, of your society, because if you don't, minus God, there can be no truth. Minus the objective reality that is the divine truth of our creation, what happens is all of it just ends up being speculation and fighting and convenience. And convenience will keep people together for a while. Exploration will keep people busy, but what it will leave is a hollowness and an emptiness. And what happens is the anger we have with others as our views of what's truth diverges tears us apart. It tears societies apart. We've seen it in America. We've seen it in the once Christian West, where people who shared a common set of beliefs who could come together and say, you know what, these policy issues aren't important. We care about the big things. We understand the big things. We understand that we worship the same creator. We understand that we have the same idea of what virtue is, what truth is. We understand the nature of sin. Absent that common language, that common cultural construct, it becomes impossible to find out, to seek out, to understand truth. And we've gotten to the point where we can't understand truth. So if you want to talk about the resurrection of civilization, or even of a group worth defending, this being potentially the end times and us not having an easy ability to do that. What I would say to you is then you have to begin structuring your society with truth at the center of it. And then you get to the question of what is it you can do to go ahead and put Christ at the center of your life? Where is it we can apply his truth? And the radical thing that's never been tried, I mean, except for in small ways, because theology is a word that scares people, and theocracy even more so, is a society whose foundation is following the rules that Christ put out for us. By modern standards, I guess you would say such a society would seem right wing socially, because it has conservative values. The Lord in his truth remains true throughout the Bible. It's true in the Old Testament. It's true in the New Testament. And these values continue forward, even though in our modern society, we've displaced them with an idol of love and the idea of humanism, that whatever we want is the greatest truth so long as we're not hurting others. And that is not God's truth, because just because we think we're not hurting others, and when we say not hurting others, we mean not committing physical violence about it. We can emotionally destroy, rape, wreck people. I mean, think of what the COVID lockdowns did to so many people. The number of people who've committed suicide, the number of kids who are cutting, the number of people who have just been put into total trauma. But hey, we were protecting ourselves. But what were we protecting? We were protecting our bodies. We were protecting our materiality. We were protecting our dust by holding our breath. And when it all collapses and looks like a crematoria, then you begin to understand why we get into such deep and such difficult problems. So what I would say instead we should maybe do is look at what happens if we put truth at the center, if we put the Lord at the center. Good to see you, Crumb. God bless. Glad you're here with me. Yeah, today I'm just doing one of those things. I was saying a new feature I'm going to do where I come on here probably for 15 minutes a shot, talk about things that are interesting, and just give you guys some ideas to percolate upon. Welcoming feedback, of course, from our community. Hoping for this to be a growing ministry. And you guys know me. I've been around for a while. I'm not doing this just I mean, yeah, it's cathartic for me to talk, and I love to educate, but it's also a chance for us to organize people, because what I've come to realize over a lot of years of fighting over a lot of issues is that Christians make bargains with actors in the world, hoping for something good to come out to defend our values, and we constantly get manipulated and destroyed because the people who work with us are not like us. They understand what we will and won't do, and they use us. And we should not be used for others. We should not be used as a trick or footstool. Now, does the sin, go to them? Does the suffering? Of course, that we are not, to be held at fault for the good things we do and they can take advantage of. And certainly, the reason why we should be doing good things is not because we expect some reward. The Father in heaven sees and gives us the rewards for that. But what we should do is show a willingness to do as Christ said, which is to care for one another, to lay down our lives for one another, to build communities for one another. And if you read in the book of Acts specifically, you'd see something closer to what was intended, a dynamism that spread throughout the world so quickly that the living or that the dead were literally brought back to the living. And I'm not saying, they got resuscitated by CPR or, a defibrillator. What I'm saying is that there was such dynamism and energy, and there was a union that was the biggest empire in the world at that time, and took it and radically turned it apart, so much that the empire had to turn itself into a church to even survive. And of course, over time, then it got ossified because people substitute dogma for faith. We understand these things that happen and how difficult they are. But we've come to a time where now we exist in a doctrine where people have no faith or they have bad faith. The people who have no faith, linger through this world, trying to hide behind vain intellectualism and cynicism. And the people who have bad faith, they go in different varieties. There's some who approach Eastern mysticism or this idea of personal self-growth. And then there's others who will go out there and, what they'll do is they'll say, hey, my faith is in science. My faith is that the material world's all there is, but we can transcend it and live forever. And as a Christian, what we're looking at is different, that there's a greater truth, that there is a God who is greater than us, whom we cannot understand, but we can worship. And if we serve him and we serve his truth, we will get past that one big problem we have where we can't know truth, but we can choose to trust someone who does. That leap of faith is the root of civilization. That leap of faith, the beginning of a cult, let's call it what it is the root of culture. And if you're willing to make that leap, then doors start to open, because the things that constrain you will move away, because you'll realize your largest goal, this is what the Bible teaches, is obedience to the Lord, obedience to the Heavenly Father. It's not, do you have enough money to pay your bills? It's not, how do you fit into the social standing? It's, what are his rules? Are you following them? And for us as Christians, we understand that the price of this is eternal. And it makes sense that it would be. People say, how can a loving God be willing to destroy us, destroy people because he disagreed with them? How can that which is true have union with that which is untrue and survive. God cannot change his nature to suit your immediate need. The only thing he can do, the most generous, merciful thing he can do, is allow you to choose for yourself. That's the free will in it, and accept that if you choose differently, to allow you the consequence of that, to allow you the fullness of life. And if that is self destructive to the point where you've made decisions, where you've separated